I want to come with this quick hit. Um, this is something that I wanted to bring out in my last lesson, but the spirit kind of hit me today to bring this point out. And this point is, we know the Messiah, when he ascended back into the spiritual realm, right? Is a so-called black man. The description, in Daniel 10 and 6 and Revelation 1 and 14, as him being a so-called black man. So us knowing this, it wouldn't make sense for him to be a so-called white man in a physical earthly form and ascend up back into the heavenly realm as a so-called, black man. Wouldn't make sense, right? So that means if he was a so-called black man in the spiritual body, that he was a so-called black man in the physical body. That just makes sense. And we know that the Israelites were so-called black people, the Jews, Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. All right, with so-called people of color. All right, to say it like that. But this would be a accurate depiction of the Messiah as it's described in the scriptures. This will be a more accurate assessment, right? So this is what you need to have in your mind when you think about the Messiah. A lot of our people, when they think about so-called Jesus, this comes up in a mental, in a mind, right? Let me show you. So that's a part of us being reborn that we have to go with this, this new, image that we should put in our mind, right? So this must come out of your mind right here. These images. When you think about the Messiah, you got to think about him as the scripture has said, right? As being a so-called black man. Salakia, give me 1 second. There we go. This will be a more accurate depiction. Now, we're not saying this how the Messiah looks. We're saying this is an accurate depiction. He'll be a so-called black man with white woolly hair. All right? Let's go here. It's a point I want to make too. That when you come in this truth, I found a good way they worded this. It says, what does it mean to learn, unlearn, and relearn? I'm going to do a lesson specifically on this, but I'm just going to kind of get into this real quick. It said, what does that mean? Right? It says sometimes we learn things which are either not correct or not true or simply just not the best way to do something. So we was taught Christianity and all the lies, the deceit, deception, and confusion that come along with it. All right. It said at some point we may discover that this thing we have learned is not correct. It's heavy. It says, or not true, or there is a better way of doing it. It may then be a good idea to unlearn this thing and relearn it the correct way, the true way, or better way. It's heavy. So you have to learn the truth right, unlearn what you've been taught, and relearn, right? Relearn the correct truth. So that's sort of the scripture real quick. So a part of this being reborn is coming into the correct image in your mind, right? So when you imagine the Messiah, you have to imagine the Messiah being as the scriptures have said he looked, right? Because if you still imagine this guy, you still under Christianity. You still under the trap of the so-called white man. All right. If you're thinking about this guy here, you're still in bondage. You haven't been freed mentally. Let's go here. 2 Corinthians 10 and 5. It says casting down imaginations. And one of these imaginations, if you look at my last lesson, was what the so-called white man conjured up in his mind. His imagination is how the Messiah looked, which you don't add up nothing to the scriptures, right? This is just a figment of the so-called white man imagination, this cunningly devised fable. It says casting down imagination. So we to cast down this one of these things we casting down, this image that's in our mind. You got to throw this out of your mind. So when you think about the Messiah, this can't come up, this image. All right. It says casting down imagination. So you got to throw it down to the ground, right? In a metaphorical sense. You got to throw it out of your mind. And every high thing that exalted itself against the knowledge of Yahweh by Hashem Yahushua. And that's anybody, that's anything, right? That's not coming in complete truth. And bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Hamashiach, So yeah, you have to throw these thoughts out of your mind right here when you think about the Messiah. And you got to think about him as being a so-called black man. This will be a more accurate depiction of him right here. This is the more accurate depiction, the so-called black man. So this must come up in your mind, when you think about the Messiah. All right, that's how you know you've been set free. All right, so let's go here. 2 Corinthians 10 and 5. It says, casting down imaginations. Let's go to this word imagine, because this is how you get the word imagination. All right, it says imagine. I want to show you something. Slovakia. Right here, this heavy. It says imagine. It says to form a picture in your mind of what something might be like. That is heavy. Right here, it says imagine. That's how you got the word imagination. It says imagine, to form a picture. To form a picture. So the so-called white man gave you his pictures, his images, his portraits, and that's what's stored in most of our people's mind when they think about the Messiah. All right, that means you still in bondage. If you think about this guy, this idol, all right, if you have feelings towards that guy, that idol, all right, you haven't been set free. I said imagine. Let's go back to this definition, imagine. It says imagine, to form a picture or idea in your mind about what something might be. All right, so this going back into the depiction of Yahweh and Yahweh Shah. The Most High is a so-called black man as well. It says imagine, to form a mental picture or image. That's heavy. To form a mental picture or image. So when our people think about the Messiah, that's why we don't say that name Jesus, because that's a false name and that's an idol. But this was associated with that name, this image. So this means you haven't been freed yet. But when you think about Yahweh Shah, which is the true name of the Messiah, and you picture him as the scripture have said, all right, you've casted down the so-called white man trickery, his deception, and his deceit out of your mind. If you truly have been that's the process of being reborn, rather. All right. So I just want to come with this quick hit. It wasn't going to be nothing too long. But as we see in this world fall apart, the Lord is putting the spirit on us to go deeper into the wiles of the devil, man, the tricks and schemes and so on and so forth. But I see you on the next one. Shalom. Call Halal Yahweh by Hashem, Yahweh Shah, by Hashem, Rakak Wadash. Shalom.